Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Movie Tales. And in this episode, for the first time on this series, we're diving into something I am genuinely impressed we're getting to so early in this series because I mean, it's Redford and Newman. When were we going to do this? I knew it was coming at some point. You cannot do these two. You cannot do a show about movies without talking about these two. I didn't know when I was going to do it, and I was like, is it going to be Butch and Sundance? It has to be Butch and Sundance. But the other day on TCM, they were running all these films. The Sting came up, and I'm like, let's watch The Sting. So I watched The Sting again, and it's good. It's not my favorite of the bunch. I still like Butch and Sundance more, but it's just good to see these guys in their prime doing some cool stuff. So I do want to talk a little bit about each of them, because they are very cool and just awesome guys. Paul Newman's just the coolest. Like, when you look at like one of the generational actors who will inspire everyone, it's Paul Newman, because he just had that vintage swagger and cool that just exuded from his body. The baby blue eyes, the right energy. He could do no wrong by the eyes of the public, and he hasn't done any wrong in any of his films. Just the coolest guy, the coolest vibe, who just does everything right and is just such a fun, pleasant guy to see on screen. And then you get to Redford, who is the other kind of cool guy. Just a little more mischievous and young, full of like this energy and pop. And I was looking at Redford, I'm like, who is the next Redford that we've seen in acting? It was probably Brad Pitt. Brad Pitt became that energy of what Redford exuded. And I'm just like, that is such a genuinely like certain, that's just such a certain identity for an actor that hardly anybody else has presented that in the modern era. They're both great guys, and when they're working together, you get some great stuff. So the Sting, this is a big operation to take down some asshole, and that's what this is. If you've never seen the Sting before, I'm going to pitch it to you right now in the simplest way possible. Bunch of old white dudes make fun of another old white dude because he's bad at reading a room. That's all this is. So we got Redford at the age of 37, playing a young man, which is one of my favorite things about this film, is that everybody calls him a young man or boy or kid when he's about still around the age of 40. Well, he kind of like does this bad con men thing, and suddenly he's like thrust into this otherworldly working with Paul Newman, and they have to kind of like take down this mobster political guy who is kind of like, you know, hit their friend. They killed their friend, so now they're like, we're going to pull a big operation to take this guy down. And that's the thing about this movie that I just adore. It's like the whole movie is just this one operation. It is just a bunch of dudes planning a job, a big job, so precisely that nothing about it goes wrong. They fake every single aspect of this film, and it's just a pantsless one guy. And that is just incredible to me that we can actually do that and have it in a cohesive story, because it's so dumb. If this was in the wrong hands, and I'm sure anybody else who's seen this film would be like, I could make this. If this film is in the wrong hands, it is the slowest and most methodical thing you are ever going to see, because it does not do anything. You think there's going to be some big epic scene? No, there's a couple of scenes where Redford's running around being chased by like some FBI agent or some, you know, Lieutenant Snyder. That's it. That's like the only action in this thing. And then the rest of it's just, hey, here's a bunch of old white dudes in a room building a fake racing betting spot. I'm like, this is insane. This is so weird. Why is this working? It's just so dumb. It's just a bunch of dudes pretending to be something they're not, and then they actually win. And then, like, it does the most insane thing for a film like this. And this is one of the things, like, in the modern era, you could never get away with, like, not having your villain realize they've been duped by these guys. The villain at the end of this, the villain, just kind of, like, gets, like, thrown away by Snyder. That's it. Like, there's, like, no resolution to the actual, like, oh, he killed their friend. No, he's just, like, pulled out of there because we took all his money. It's insanely weird. It's such a weird story. And you know what? It kind of works well for what this entire series was presenting itself to be. I just thought that was so crazy and different. So yeah, we got Robert Shaw in here in one of his earlier roles, because sadly he would pass away a couple years later. He is incredible. Just playing like this certain type of guy who is just an ass, who is just hated by everyone, but just so powerful in the room he walks into. Everybody is waiting for him to react. And that's cool, because that's kind of the energy I'm sure he gives off in real life when people met him. Just like this commanding presence, this guy who could do everything and everyone's going to watch what he does, because that's the energy he exudes. And he is just gone through the ringer in this at every single moment. The moment he meets all these characters, when we're on the train We have the card game. He gets the heist pulled off. Then he starts placing bets on the horses. Then he gets chased down by the FBI, and everybody's just like a part of this. I'm like, this guy must be a big dick, because the level of commitment you go into pantsing somebody like this, you do not see anymore. We do not make films like this anymore, where it's just a bunch of grown dudes like pranking a guy. That's just what vloggers do now. These guys were like the OG vloggers. And there's just so many like interesting scenes in here that could be presented as just like, this is a creative way to work around not having the budget, but it's pretty good. Like, there's this idea being that we have to talk to a guy at Western Union, so we pretend we're painters, we break into the building, have them come in the side door, then we leave without people realizing we were in there for a hot minute. It's smart. I'm like, yeah, you probably just used a Western Union to do that. It's so weird. Such a weird thing. And they just like buy lots and they hire these people to do this stuff. It does that thing that a lot of modern films try to do as well, where it's like there's already like an underground circuit with all these people connected to like the big bosses, and like, hey, you just show up, pretend you're placing bets on a horse. Just, could you just imagine actually doing something like that, and you're not Mr. Beast or something? Like, that's the level of commitment that this like these guys have to this stuff. It is insane. All going into this like making this one guy look bad. It's so weird. Like I said, Redford's playing the youngest old guy, or the oldest young guy you've ever seen before, because again, he's 37, everyone's calling him kid. He's doing really good. He's just presenting this perfect swagger. I think he won the Oscar for this, or he was nominated for this. It's a great performance, because he's just slowly figuring out, oh, this life is probably going to consume me and do me wrong somehow. It's really great to see that. He just looks kind of silly in like the big suits and the silly hats. He's supposed to be kind of out of place there, and it works well. Then you got Paul Newman. And look, we could do every Paul Newman movie out there, and I'm sure we'll get to it eventually. But my goodness, is this man just confident every time he walks in the room? Like, I think one of the best bits of his entire career, and maybe I shouldn't say entire career, when he walks into like the poker room when they're actually playing the game of poker, and he's just pretending he's kind of drunk, he's loud and obnoxious, just fooling everybody in the room. It is perfect tension and perfect acting. He is just so good at that confidence. And I love that the two of them just walk away at the end without actually getting any of the money they stole. They're like, yeah, we just wanted to avenge our friend in a way. It's really cool. And it's just such a cool film, even though it's so ridiculous. Like, if you were to do this today, everybody involved would be a loser, because who would spend this much time just to get the money from one guy? You couldn't do it today. You can't like rent 2 lots, build these fake sets, have all these people come and put on stupid suits and pretend they're listening to the horse races, because it's just ridiculous. It just makes no sense, and sometimes it's just a really silly thing. I cannot believe it. Like, that's the entirety of this film. It's 2 hours long, and the entirety is like, oh, we're setting up the sting, we build the sting, we pull it off. There's like, it just goes exactly how it should. The fake shootout at the end fools him. That's pretty brilliant. You also see that there's like this woman working for Snyder or something who is potentially falling in love with our man here, Jake Hooker, and it's like, well, are they going to have a connection? But no, she tries to kill him. And that's the other thing I really like about this. The blood is so good. It is just so fake looking, and I love that, because that's just the 70s. That's just, we're kind of slowly moving into more like, you know, graphic and just dark ideas on our film. We can't get there yet, so the blood's gonna just look ketchupy and just silly, and it's gonna have like a small bullet wound in her head, and you're just gonna see like a little bit of blood on her head. Or when somebody gets shot, you're just gonna see like a little bit of a scar of blood on it. It's so fun. Like, that is just such a silly concept to explore that actually works for this story, that actually makes sense for it. I'm just super impressed that this film was just so dumb, and it works so well. It's just it's just watching grown men prank a dude. It's so ridiculous, and they get a lot of money from him, like $500,000, and then more of it because he places a 4-to-1 bet on it. And I'm like, what the hell, dude? This is so insane. It's just such an intricate prank, and that's all this is. And then you look at stuff that came out before it, like Robin and the Seven Hoods, where it's just like, hey, we're going to help these people out and blah, blah, blah. That is done poorly. And it's very similar to this, but this one's just smarter and more brilliant. They even fake an FBI agent, which I'm like, I knew it was going to be fake because they already said, like, earlier on, Snyder's on his tail. We have to find a way to do that. It's so weird, but it works so well. And something about that is just exactly the 70s. Like, this is like, I think one of the last kind of like studio films that's slowly pushing its way into like that modern era where suddenly we're stopping with like our, you know, just like the basic studio system Now we're getting real. This is kind of like the last effort of Redford and Newman in that era, because everything they do after this is kind of in that pseudo-independent style, and that's kind of cool to see. I cannot believe this thing was nominated for 10 Oscars and won 7 of them, because it's just unbelievably silly and weird, and just goes to show you that, yeah, films back then, you could really just make something like this and your audience loved it. There's a lot of cool twists, and I do think that's kind of cool. It does go to some interesting areas where people are betraying people. Everything's a ruse. You think they're hating each other. They're actually pranking everybody, all to get Robert Shaw pissed off and lose his money. That's how the movie ends. That's kind of brilliant. It's just an ending. There's no resolution. They pulled off the sting. It worked. They can go on with their lives as, a young man in his 40s and an old man in his 50s. Oh, boy. Just perfectly those two actors and that generation. I think it's very fun. I think this film is unique. Is it as good as Butch and Sundance? I don't think so. But the chemistry is still there between the two, and they're building an expansive world with a bunch of old dudes pranking one guy. It is super silly and super weird, and I do like The Sting for that reason. There's literally never going to be a movie like it again because it's dumb. But it works because of how dumb it is. So that's going to do it for this rendition of Dynamic Tales. Now, thank you guys so much for watching this video. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. As always, you can check me out on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. And as always, I will catch you in the next one. Have fun. Stay safe. Good luck.